It was supposed to be just another quiet Saturday morning, a routine that Kayla had grown accustomed to over the years. A quick trip to the grocery store, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the soft shuffle of other shoppers, and the familiar aisles that offered comfort in their predictability. There was nothing extraordinary about this day, nothing to suggest that it would be any different from the others. Kayla's mind was preoccupied with a list in her hand, mentally tallying up the ingredients for the dinner she planned to make that evening. A pot roast, the kind that made the house smell like home, with mashed potatoes and vegetables on the side. Nothing too fancy, just a simple meal to share with her husband, Ethan. They had always made it a point to sit down together at the end of the week, even when the days got busy, even when life seemed to pull them in different directions. It was their thing, simple, comforting, steady. She found herself gravitating toward the produce section, the familiar sense of fresh fruit filling the air. The apples caught her eye first, their vibrant red and green skins a promise of sweetness. She was lost in thought, mentally cataloging which ones would be best for the recipe, when she rounded the corner into the aisle. And there he was, Ethan. At first, she felt a surge of warmth, the kind you get when you see someone you love in a place you didn't expect to find them. She thought of walking over to him, giving him a playful nudge, maybe a quick hug to surprise him. They'd been married for 12 years. After all, 12 years of shared memories, quiet mornings, and laughter. But that instinct was short-lived, replaced by something else entirely. There, standing by the apple display, Ethan wasn't alone. At his side was a woman she didn't recognize. She was laughing softly at something Ethan had said, her eyes warm, her expression full of familiarity. Kayla's heart skipped a beat as she watched them, their easy conversation like something out of a different life, a life she wasn't part of. And then there was the little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, with blonde curls and bright, curious eyes. The child was tugging at Ethan's sleeve, calling out, "Daddy, Daddy." Her voice was sweet, innocent. But the word, Daddy, struck Kayla like a blow to the chest. Time seemed to stop. Kayla stood frozen, unable to look away. Ethan's face softened, a smile spreading across his lips as he bent down to hand the little girl an apple. The moment they shared was so intimate, so natural, it felt wrong. It was as though they were a family that Kayla had never known existed. Her mind raced as she stood there, hidden behind the stacks of fruit, her heart thundering in her chest. Who were they? The woman? The child? Why was Ethan standing there with them, laughing and sharing this quiet moment? Why had he never told her about them? The questions flooded in, each one sharper than the last, each one carrying the weight of 1,000 doubts. For a long moment, she watched them, her eyes fixated on the scene unfolding before her. She wanted to call out, to confront Ethan right then and there. The urge to march over, to demand answers, was almost overwhelming. But something inside her held her back. Maybe it was the way they looked at each other, the way they moved together, like a family who had known each other for years. Confronting him now wouldn't give her the truth. It would only lead to excuses, explanations, things that might sound convincing in the moment, but wouldn't satisfy the questions running through her mind. No, she needed more than that. She needed proof. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she turned her cart around. Abandoning it in the middle of the aisle, she walked quickly out of the store, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. She didn't care that the cart was left behind, that someone would likely move it out of the way. She had bigger things to worry about now, things that demanded her full attention. Outside, the cool air hit her face, but offered little comfort. She could feel the weight of the discovery pressing down on her, suffocating her. She climbed into her car, the engine's hum barely registering as she stared at the steering wheel, her hands gripping it tightly. Her mind was spinning, 1,000 thoughts colliding in a frenzy. How long had this been going on? How had she missed it? And why hadn't Ethan been honest with her? She blinked rapidly, trying to force the tears back, but they came anyway, spilling down her cheeks. Her heart ached, a raw, aching pain that felt as though it might split her wide open. But she didn't let herself fall apart. Not yet. She couldn't. Not when there were still so many unanswered questions. Not when the future felt so uncertain, like the ground beneath her feet had been pulled away. She wiped her tears away, her face hardening into something resolute. This wasn't over. Not yet. She wouldn't let it be. She needed answers, and she was going to get them, one way or another. The uncertainty of all, the shock, the hurt, the confusion, was overwhelming, but in the midst of it, a quiet determination began to take root. She wouldn't let this secret, this betrayal, shatter everything she had built with Ethan. She would find out the truth, no matter how difficult it might be to face. And when she did, she would be ready. Days had drifted by, yet the haunting image of Ethan with another woman and a child lingered in Kayla's mind like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over everything she did. She couldn't escape it. Their laughter, the intimate way they seemed to fit together. It was a betrayal she couldn't ignore. Questions swirled, each one darker than the last. Who was she? Why was Ethan with them? What did this mean for Kayla? Every thought seemed to cut deeper, tearing at her sense of trust. The uncertainty gnawed at her until there was no room left for anything else. Kayla knew she couldn't let this go. She couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine. The pain in her chest told her that she needed to find answers, even if they shattered everything she thought she knew about her life and about Ethan. So, she made a decision. She would search for the truth, no matter how ugly or painful it might be. But where could she start? One evening, as she was preparing dinner, a thought crossed her mind. She needed something from the store, an ingredient she hadn't realized was missing. Normally, she would have just gone herself, but tonight, she saw an opportunity. Her heart raced with a mix of nervous excitement. She called out to Ethan, asking if he could run to the store for her. Ethan, as always, kissed her lightly on the cheek and grabbed his wallet without hesitation. The door clicked behind him, and the sudden silence that filled the house felt deafening. This was her chance. Her fingers trembled as she stared at Ethan's phone on the counter. It sat there innocently, but in that moment, it was the key to unlocking the answer she needed. She had never snooped before. She had always trusted him, until now. The thought of betraying his trust made her stomach twist, but she couldn't just keep wondering. What if this was the only way to know? She was searching for the truth, something she felt she couldn't live without now. Taking a deep breath, she picked it up. For a moment, her mind screamed at her to stop, to put the phone down and walk away. But instead, she hesitated only briefly before unlocking the screen. No password, no barriers. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the messages. There, at the top of the list, was a conversation with someone named Monica. The words were innocent at first, casual greetings, plans to meet up, but soon the tone shifted. "I miss you," one message read. Another, "I can't wait to see you and Lily this weekend." Lily, the little girl from the store. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. The world around her seemed to freeze as her eyes traced the words, the weight of them sinking into her chest. She kept scrolling. Each new message was like a knife. Pictures. Ethan with Monica, smiling, holding hands with Lily, laughing in a park. Another picture from what looked like a birthday party. A life, their life. One that Kayla wasn't a part of, one she knew nothing about. It wasn't a new life. This had been happening for a while. Her body went cold. Kayla felt the world tilt on its axis. How could he do this? How had Ethan hidden it from her? The thought of him laughing and sharing moments with them, building memories she wasn't even allowed to know about, made her heart ache. The man she had trusted had been living a double life right under her nose. She dropped the phone back onto the counter, her mind whirling. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in. She couldn't breathe. How was she supposed to face him now? How could she pretend nothing was wrong when everything she knew felt like a lie? But she didn't confront him. Not yet. Not that night. The next morning, with the pain of betrayal still heavy in her chest, Kayla made up her mind. She would find out more. She needed to know the whole truth. And so, when Ethan left for work, she followed him. It felt strange, unnatural, almost lurking in the background, but she couldn't stop herself. She needed to know, and she kept her distance, careful not to be seen. To her surprise, Ethan didn't go straight to the office. Instead, he drove across town, pulling into the parking lot of a small diner. Her heart beat faster, and her curiosity flared. What was he doing here? Why was he meeting someone in a place so far from home? Then, moments later, she saw them. Monica, Lily. They walked up to him, and Ethan's face lit up in a way she hadn't seen in a long time. He bent down to hug Lily, and Kayla felt a pang in her chest. They looked so familiar, so right together. Like a family. Kayla couldn't look away. She sat in her car, staring at them, feeling like a stranger to a world she didn't belong in. Monica placed a gentle hand on Ethan's arm as they walked into the diner, and Lily clung to his side as if she had always been there. Kayla's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. She watched them, every second feeling like a lifetime, and yet she couldn't bring herself to drive away. She had to know. She had to see how far this secret life went. After they finished their meal, she followed them, careful to keep her distance. She watched as they drove to a small house on the other side of town, and Ethan kissed Lily on the forehead before leaving. A family, a life, a future that didn't include her. Kayla parked outside the house for hours, not able to leave, but not able to go inside either. Her mind was a storm of questions, but no answers came. She sat there, in her car, feeling like a part of her had just been torn away, and the pain of it all settled in her chest like a heavy stone. The betrayal was too much to bear, but she couldn't walk away. Not yet. And so, she sat there, waiting, not knowing what she was supposed to do next, but knowing one thing for certain. She was no longer the woman she had been the day before. The truth had found her. Now, she just had to face it. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Kayla had spent weeks, months even, and tonight, she was going to make sure he faced it. The evening had come, and Ethan's familiar footsteps echoed as he entered their home. The warmth of the kitchen felt like a cruel contrast to the coldness building inside her. She had everything she needed spread out on the kitchen table, everything she had been collecting, piece by piece. Photos, text messages, bank statements. She'd been methodical in her approach, never letting him suspect that she had uncovered his lies. But tonight, that facade would come crumbling down. Kayla's heart was pounding, but her face remained composed, calm. She had to be strong. No more second-guessing. No more wondering if she was making the right choice. The truth was undeniable, and Ethan would have to face it. "Sit down," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. Ethan, ever the picture of casual ease, didn't seem to notice the tension in the air. He dropped his keys on the counter, smiling, asking about her day as if everything were just fine. But Kayla's silence was enough to let him know that something had shifted. Her fingers curled around the papers before her, and with a deep breath, she began. "I hired someone to look into this," she said. Her voice was firm now, no longer betraying the vulnerability that had haunted her for so long. "I know about Monica, about Lily, about everything." Ethan's grin faltered. He hadn't expected this. His confident posture melted away, and he reached for the folder, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the pages. The photos, the texts, the credit card transactions, the lies that had woven their way through their entire relationship. His eyes widened, panic setting in as he absorbed the magnitude of what he had done. But it was too late to stop it now. He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded hollow, desperate. "Kayla, look, this isn't what you think." But Kayla was done listening. The hurt, the betrayal, the years of confusion, it was all coming to a boiling point. She had waited for him to come clean, to tell her the truth, but he never did. And now, she wasn't going to wait any longer. "Don't." She cut him off, her voice as sharp as broken glass. "You don't get to explain yourself. Not anymore." Ethan's face crumpled as he stammered, trying to piece together some sort of apology. Words spilled out, half-hearted and unconvincing. Excuses, promises, pleas to make it right. But Kayla had heard them all before, and they meant nothing now. They were just empty words, empty gestures to cover up the mess he had made of their lives. She stood there, her hands shaking slightly, but her resolve stronger than ever. You've been lying to me for years, Ethan. You've been living a whole other life, one I wasn't even a part of. How could you do this?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, she felt the sharp sting of the betrayal cut through her once again. But she quickly swallowed it, pushing through the pain. Ethan's face twisted with guilt, his apologies coming faster now. Almost frantic. "I'm sorry, Kayla. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'll do whatever it takes." But she wasn't listening anymore. Kayla had heard enough. His words were nothing more than a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his dignity, and she wasn't going to fall for it. Not now. Not after everything he had put her through. "You don't get to love me now, Ethan. Not after this," she said, her voice cold, final. There was no room for him in her world anymore. No room for his broken promises and his lies. With that, she turned away from him, walking out of the kitchen and leaving him there, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. The silence in the room was deafening, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. She had done it. She had finally confronted the truth. And as she walked away, she felt a strange sense of relief. The hardest part was over, but the real question lingered in her mind. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever trust him again? The answer, she knew deep down, was no. Ethan had shattered something inside her that couldn't be repaired. And as she stepped into the next chapter of her life, she wasn't going to look back. She had faced the truth, and now it was time to move on. Kayla couldn't stay there that night. The walls of their house, once filled with laughter and the warmth of shared dreams, now seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with memories of a life that no longer existed. Her mind raced, spinning with thoughts of Ethan's betrayal, the lies that had cut deeper than any knife ever could. Her heart was shattered, and yet, somehow, it was still beating. She packed a bag for her son, his tiny clothes folded neatly as though they could somehow bring comfort amidst the chaos. She didn't even stop to think. Her hands moved on autopilot, pulling together what little she could. Her son, still asleep in his room, had no idea that his world was about to be turned upside down. She glanced at him one last time, tears threatening to spill, but she knew she had to leave. She needed space, solace, and someone to lean on. Without a word, she slipped out of the house and drove to her best friend's place. The night air was cold, but the warmth of her car seemed to mock the numbness she felt inside. She didn't know how long she had been driving, but the familiar streets leading to her friend's house provided a small, fleeting sense of security. When she finally pulled into the driveway, she didn't even wait for the car to come to a full stop before she rushed to the door. Her best friend didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She knew, without a single word, what had happened. Kayla collapsed into her arms, the floodgates of her emotions opening wide. There, in the safety of her best friend's embrace, Kayla cried, sobs that shook her body, raw and desperate. All the anger, all the betrayal, the hurt and confusion that had been building inside her for months, no, for years, came rushing out like a storm. Her friend held her tight, offering no judgment, only love and a silent promise that she wasn't alone. The days that followed felt like an endless blur. Kayla could barely keep up with the weight of it all. She met with a lawyer, the first step in a process she never imagined she'd be part of. It wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about untangling her life from the knots Ethan had left behind. Every conversation with her lawyer felt like a reminder of the devastation she had suffered. The legal battle was exhausting, a tug-of-war over their home, their finances, their child. The paperwork piled up, the phone calls never stopped. And yet, despite everything, Kayla found herself waking up each day with one thought. She had to keep going. It wasn't easy. At times, she felt like she was losing herself in the fight. But as the weeks passed, Kayla began to see small victories. She secured full custody of their son, a decision that came with its own weight of responsibility and fear. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a glimmer of control. Ethan's lies, the betrayal that had haunted her for so long, were finally exposed for all to see. The man she had once loved, who had promised to cherish her, was nothing more than a stranger, a person she barely recognized anymore. The truth had a way of freeing her, even as it caused more pain. And though Kayla knew the battle was far from over, a sense of justice began to take root in her heart. She could still remember the look on Ethan's face when the truth came out, the shame in his eyes as the life he had built on lies crumbled before him. For the first time, she didn't feel sorry for him. She felt sorry for herself, for all the years she had spent in the dark. But she also felt something else, empowered. She had won, but winning the battle didn't mean the war was over. Kayla had to rebuild her life, piece by piece, and it wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things she had ever done. The woman she had been, the wife, the partner, was no more. That identity had been ripped away from her in an instant. She had to rediscover who she was, beyond the role she had played for so long. The first step was her son, of course. He was her anchor, her reason to wake up each morning. But even in the depths of motherhood, Kayla realized she had to also find herself again. She focused on her family, those who had been there for her all along. She leaned on her parents, her friends, her support system. Each day, she made small steps toward healing. She returned to the things that once brought her joy: reading, painting, long walks through the park. She remembered who she was before Ethan, before the lies, before the heartbreak. And slowly, with each passing day, she began to feel whole again. The woman who had once been lost in the ashes of a broken marriage began to rise. Kayla discovered strength she never knew she had. The fire that had nearly consumed her was now the very thing that fueled her forward. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer a victim of her circumstances. She was a survivor. Her journey wasn't over. There would still be days when the pain would hit her like a tidal wave, when the grief of what could have been would weigh on her chest. But Kayla knew that even in those moments of darkness, there was light, there was hope, and most importantly, there was her. Kayla's story is one of heartbreak, but also of courage. It is a reminder that no matter what life throws at you, you always have the power to choose how to respond. And in those choices, you find healing, strength, and hope. It's a journey of transformation, of learning to rise again after you've fallen, and of realizing that the pieces of your broken heart can be woven back together into something stronger than you ever imagined. And in the end, that's what Kayla had learned. No matter how many times life tries to break you, you can always rebuild. And sometimes you'll come back even stronger than before.